Srirang istashtuvanstastumuti Vashema devahitam yadayo Swasti no indro vriddhasravaha Swasti na pusha vishwavedaha Swasti nastaksha arishtanemihi Swasti no brihaspati dathatu Om Shanti 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 Madhuvataditayate Mattuksharanti Shindhava Madhirena Santosatihi Madhunarti Bhavangraja Madhu Taurupana Pita Madhumana Vanaspati Madhumargan Hasta Suryaha Mate Gavo Bhavantuna Om Shanti Shanti Shanti
Thank you, Shayan, and good morning, everyone. And thanks for taking out your valuable time for being here with us in this one-day international webinar on the changing role of state amidst new global disorder. I'm Shilpa Nandi, a trustee member of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, would like to brief you about our organization. Bips started its journey since 2018, and since then, our primary aim and goal was to bring the young scholars, researchers, academicians under one umbrella and to provide them a platform where they can showcase their research skills and academic pursuits. With this aim only, in this pre-COVID and COVID situation also, Bips has been successfully able to engage a large number of participants and scholars across the globe to disseminate their knowledge and information in the area of political studies mainly and the other disciplines of social science. With this note, I would now like to introduce to you all the host of this webinar, Shri Pradipta Mukherjee, Assistant Professor of Political Science, Hiranal Mujumdar College for Women, Dakshineshwar, West Bengal, and Dr. Abhishek Karmakar, who is also the joint convener of this webinar from Golshi Mahavidyalaya, West Bengal. I now like to request Pradipto to kindly introduce our inaugural session and to also introduce our speakers. Over to you, Pradipto. Thank you, and welcome you once again.
Thank you, Dr. Nandi. It gives me immense pleasure being the coordinator of the International Wave Conference to express my deepest gratitude to the revered speakers and august gathering for their gracious presence. Team Bips, under the leadership of Professor Rajkumar Kothari, President of the Institute, and Professor Vishwanath Chakraborty, Secretary of the Institute, is trying so hard to develop such an academic ambience where practitioners of social sciences will have the opportunity to make dialogue and people-to-people contact for better understanding of contemporary social, economic, and political issues. I hope and believe that through the valuable deliberations of the speakers and paper presentations, the seminar will have its due regard and reward. With this small note, I am requesting Professor Kothari to take charge from here, sir.
Good morning and welcome to each one of you to this gala event, biggest ever gala event in the history of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, Kolkata, since its inception in 2018. We are really extremely happy and pleased and honored to see that Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs, Sri V. Muralidharan, has been very kind enough to join us for this international conference on a theme, a very pertinent theme and very timely, as has been already mentioned by Shilpa Nandi. The title of the conference is The Changing Role of the State Amidst New Global Disorder. Considering the kind of developments around us in the backdrop of COVID-19, I think this topic is very pertinent, and we are going to discuss and deliberate and debate on certain issues relating to the role played by the states in the international system. And on behalf of the Bengal Institute of Political Studies, on this auspicious occasion, I am pleased and honored to welcome our distinguished Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs, Professor B. Muralidharan. And sir, we are really grateful and thankful for your gracious presence amidst us and for giving us your valuable time. And because I understand the kind of the situation and scenario in foreign ministry must be very busy, preoccupied these days because of the developments at the border and tensions around India and all. So still you have given your valuable time for this seminar, and I welcome. I also sincerely, heartily happy to welcome each one of our members and distinguished participants and the several important dignitaries who are going to chair several important sessions, and also the keynote speaker of today's international conference, Professor P.V. Paul from Canada, sir. He is very likely to join very shortly from Canada because it is 2 a.m. Midnight in Canada right now, so he will join in few moments. So I welcome Professor T.P. Paul. I also welcome our distinguished special guest of today's international conference, Professor Sanjeev Kumar Sharma. He is the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi Central University, NCR. And I welcome Professor Sanjeev Sharma as the chief guest of this seminar, and I would request him to say a few words in our valedictory session, since this morning session time is very short. Professor Martin Malik from Austria, Vienna is with us, and then Ganga Thapa from Nepal, Kathmandu is with us, Professor Tulsi also from Bangladesh with us, then Brigadier Debashish Dash, and many other distinguished participants in this August gathering. And Ovirup Sarkar I cannot see, but I suppose he is also, Professor Ovirup Sarkar is with us. So I welcome you all and wish this program very best, and request my colleague, Secretary of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, Professor Vishwanath Chakraborty, to say a few words about the relevance and importance of the today's seminar theme. Welcome, Vishwanath, please.
Thank you. Good morning, all of you. We are really glad to have Sri V. Muralidharan, Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs. In spite of his busy schedule, he is kind enough to join with us. Sir, we welcome you. We are really thankful for your presence. I also express my gratitude to Sanjeev Sharma, T.V. Paul, Martin Malik, Ovirup Sarkar, Ganga Thapa, C. Vinod, and a lot of distinguished speakers, resource person, chairperson from different parts of the world. Sir, at this moment, most of the countries are self-isolating due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Domestically, they are facing a painful choice between opening their economy and exposing their population to further infection. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a large-scale impact on political, economic, social, administrative, and cultural sphere throughout the world. The major world of power has failed to give any direction or leadership in this human crisis. The global institution like UNO, who have failed to play the desired role under this crisis. The helpless of international bodies stand exposed. Far from doing good, some of them only cover up misdeed. The European Union just disappeared when needed most. Withdrawn of US's support to who will make human crisis more serious in nature. Since 1990s of the last century, we have systematically started to minimize the role of the state in the name of the new liberal economy. We have handed over welfare activity from government to private sector market for achieving efficiency. We put our trust on the role of private sector for basic human services. However, COVID-19 showed that market has failed miserably to ensure our much required services. Even today, some of the capitalist states have either reintroduced or strengthened the PDS public distribution system to deal the crisis. From health sector to food, from employment generation program to financial support to the private sector, the state has emerged in a big way. Further, the government in different countries have adopted emergency measures to curb this crisis. There is a welfareism versus market dimension, the continuity versus discontinuity dimension, permanency versus advocacy dimension, transparency versus public order, life versus livelihood are the major area of debate coming up in the yard of the public administration and policy science today. On the other hand, COVID-19 has brought a new normal in our everyday life, also in our cultural sector. Experts observe that the new normal is in our daily life and culture may not be same from like that of old normal. Keeping in view this backdrop, we have organized today's international conference. Broadly, there are 4 category area which we'd like to discuss: the changing role of the state in COVID-19 pandemic crisis, the shifting of power and influence in world order, emerging public administration and public policy in COVID-19 pandemic, and emerging new normal in our daily life and culture. So, friends, hope throughout the day we can have a fruitful analysis and we can come some conclusion and can offer some suggestion to the government as a form of policy. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishwanath, for a valuable introduction about the theme of today's international conference. And now I am really honored and happy to invite and request a humble request to the Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs, Government of India, Sri V. Muralidharan sir. Kindly address your valuable speech, deliver your valuable speech to this seminar, and kindly inaugurate this seminar. And immediately after your presentation, I would request you to inaugurate our newsletter, which we have worked hard during last 1 year. All the events have been incorporated in the newsletter. So with this, may I now request Professor V. Muralidharan sir kindly address the August gathering.
Professor Rajkumar Kothari, President, Bengal Institute of Political Studies, Professor Pradipta Mukherjee, the convener and treasurer of BIPS, Professor Vishwanath Chakrabarti, secretary of BIPS, other distinguished speakers, participants in today's conference, ladies and gentlemen, namaskaram to all of you. I'm glad to be part of this conference today, organized by the Bengal Institute of Political Studies. I only wish that this was a conference organized in a conventional manner and I could come to Kolkata to meet you all. But this age of coronavirus has made it impossible and in a way has forced me to connect with each of you. Irrespective of whether the medium of interaction is either digital or physical. At the outset, I must congratulate BIPS, a very young, dynamic academic forum aimed at exchange of ideas among the academia and research scholars for tirelessly working, even during the testing times of pandemic, to promote meaningful exchange of views among the academic community on issues of significance. From the second annual newsletter of the Institute, which I am supposed to release in a short while from now, I find their academic activities have been contextual, very timely, and involved a delightful variety of personalities to bring in diversity of opinions and experiences on any particular theme, which I consider is very special and unique. I hope BIPS further expands its outreach to scholars in the Northeast, Northern and Southern India in their future events. Friends, incidentally, as I inaugurate and convey my best wishes to all the participants for fruitful discussions and deliberations during this day-long conference, I must also make my effort to ponder upon the theme of today's conference, which I believe is stimulating one. And I must admit that it did provoke some thoughts in my mind, which I am very glad to share with you. I hope during your deliberations, you would further develop them to expand our understanding about the uncertain phase that we are passing through as a country and as mankind. And I believe that, in a way, the challenges thrown up by the pandemic and the disruptions caused by it is among the reasons why the organizers chose this particular theme for the conference. Friends, a new global disorder that has become the parlance of international relations in recent years. But what do we mean by that? I would like to highlight before you three key factors that sum up the shifting natures of the nature of world politics. And one, the rising sentiments of nationalism across the globe. Second, the rebalancing of global power to the east. And third, the uncertainty over the future of the liberal world order as we know it. All three pose certain pertinent questions regarding global anxieties on representation, authority, globalization, and technology. To a large extent, rising competition amongst major geopolitical powers in the existing multipolar world order and a fractured political economic consensus have diminished global governance institutions and the global community's capacity for collective action. The COVID pandemic is an example from where lessons could be drawn if we have to iron out differences to meet the demands of a similar crisis in future. The liberal order, designed to reflect the realities of the mid-20th century, appears inflexible and incapable of accommodating new forces. Its norms and institutions seems outdated. The perceived challenge to hegemony of established powers, rising instances of inequality in the West, and resistance to globalization from within the liberal zone, as evidenced by the tectonic events like Brexit, all underline the fact that the global order is in a state of flux. This has led to democracies becoming more protectionist in their approach and has fueled the rise of populism. The crisis has allowed authoritarian governments to make a greater impact on the international system. In addition, a zero-sum approach to development and the securitization of growth are creating a new potential for conflict. Today, we are faced with the non-traditional threats to national states. In dealing with cross-border issues like climate change and management of a secure internet, we are confronted with inconsistencies which contribute significantly to the present-day disorder with marked geopolitical dimensions. With greater interlinkages between the climate and the global economy, states seek better control of the narrative. New rules have to be framed, and India, for one, will rise up to the challenge to frame some of these rules that rightly accommodate the aspirations of it. These are not normal times. Crisis accelerates history, and the COVID pandemic has been no different. The journey so far during the pandemic has been difficult. However, much more lies ahead. The future trajectory of India's global standing will, in part, may be determined by how we deal with a crisis like the pandemic. Going ahead, roles of states will change. New actors and ideas will emerge from the remnants of the older dispensation. To script the architecture of the 21st century, India has an important role to play, especially in countering the disorders I have mentioned before. India's healthy economy, appreciation for pluralism, commitment for free trade, and desire to shun extreme ideologies are its core strength. India views the world as borderless, as one with interlinked market economies. As we emerge out of the pandemic, India is aspiring to become the nerve center of global supply chains, aligned with our vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, as announced by the Prime Minister. We look at the world from the prism of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that is, the whole world is one family. Our outreach to the world during the COVID pandemic as the pharmacy of the world has highlighted that India saw opportunity in the recent crisis to assume able leadership and use its domestic experiences to define the course for international engagement. Our size and demographic dividend, our growing clout in international relations, and stake in practically every major multilateral organization, complemented by our sustained commitment to democracy and its unique identity as a non-hegemonic global order, will be our strength in this seemingly anarchic order, and they will help in our quest for finding a rightful place for our country among the Committee of Nations. With these words, I once again wish you all a very fruitful discussions today. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Very pertinent, valuable presentation, taking into account the situation across the globe. And you have very rightly pointed out India's position and India's role in the coming years. Definitely, we all like to see that India plays a major role in the arena of global politics, because in order to get out of this global disorder, a country like India can only play the most vital role. So once again, sir, on behalf of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, I really appreciate and thank for your valuable address, sir. And now I would request, sir, since it is COVID-19 situation, so virtually my colleague Abhishek is presenting the newsletter of our activities during last 1 year, the Bips newsletter. And sir, kindly inaugurate the newsletter, sir. Abhishek, please come forward and present the newsletter before our honorable sir.
Is it visible, sir?
No, not yet.
Is it visible?
Yes, now.
Yes,
now,
it is now.
Now it's coming. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, and sir, this is the news bulletin of Bengal Institute of Political Studies. On the left side, this is me, Dr. Rajkumar Kothari, and right side, Vishwanath Chakraborty, our secretary. And in the below, last year we organized an international conference, same like this. And then in the following pages, go ahead, Abhishek. Abhishek, keep going. Move on to the next page. Yes, these are some of the activities during this last 1 year. We have arranged at Jadavpur University, at Kolkata Press Club, and different other institutions physically. And go ahead, go forward, Abhishek. Abhishek, go forward. Yes, this is the last international conference. Some snapshots.
Quick.
Quick, Abhishek, go forward. Go forward. Further. This is the last news bulletin, sir. Last year, it was inaugurated by our honorable ambassador, Sri Professor Ashok Sajjanar, sir. And these are some of the activities we are organizing, holding during the COVID-19 pandemic online through virtual mode. Series of lectures on important mega events globally relevant to us. We are organizing, and we are involved in some social service activities as well. And this is all about the news bulletin, sir. And we wish your blessings. We need your support to go forward, because Bengal Institute of Political Studies as an organization, voluntary association, has started its journey since 2018, and we intend to do a lot more, sir. Particularly in the field of social science research, globally we are trying to connect ourselves, and many people across the globe within the country are connected with us, and we need your support and blessings, sir. Thank you.
I have great pleasure in inaugurating the newsletter, the Bengal Institute of Political Studies newsletter. Its second edition. I'm sure that the activities that you have undertaken during the last 1 year, and also the future programs, are all very clearly mentioned there. And I'm sure that this will act as a means of communication within the academic community, and also give rise to exchange of ideas and views among the academicians. I offer the very best for you for the newsletter, so that it acts as a means of, as a tool of communication in the academic community, and all those who are interested various activities associated with the IPS.
Thank you, sir. One humble request, sir, on behalf of Bips, since this is COVID-19 pandemic situation, so we could not invite you physically to Kolkata as you expressed your desire and keenness. So in the near future, sir, we look forward, because without your support and blessings, Bips will not do much. If you stand by us, we will do a lot more and contribute to the development of India to the best of our ability, sir, in all possible ways. We need your support, blessings, and perhaps you, sir, remember that last year in ICWA, perhaps in September, over a coffee break, I had the opportunity to meet you and requested you, sir, that please come to Kolkata, West Bengal, and attend one program of Bengal Institute of Political Studies. And this is the reality of today. Exactly in 1 year's time, sir, we have got you amidst your busy schedule, because we understand, as I said, that across our border and across the globe, there are so many activities, and your ministry is round the clock busy. Hectic activities are going on, and you have given us your valuable, precious time. And in future also, we look forward to your support, sir. Many thanks, and if possible, sir, stay back with us for a few minutes more. But I will certainly, it's up to you, sir, because we'll be very happy to the extent possible, as long as you can be with us, you are with us. With your kind permission, we'll move on to our next program, sir. Keynote speaker, Professor T.V. Paul from Canada has come. And it is 2 a.m., 2 o'clock in Canada. That means we can understand the difficulties, but he is so pleased that far distance, he agreed happily to join us and make his presentation. I suppose Professor Paul is with us. Professor Paul, can you hear us? Professor
Yes, very much. Very much so.
Yes, Professor Paul, let me introduce T.V. Paul. He is a very renowned international relations specialist, sir, for your kind information. And he is currently based in McGill University, Canada. He is the James McGill Professor of International Relations, Fellow Royal Society of Canada, and he is the former President of International Studies Association 2016-17. And currently the Professor, Department of Political Science, McGill University, Montreal, Canada. Sir, we are very happy that a renowned scholar in the discipline of international relations with us. And Professor Paul, on behalf of the Bengal Institute of Political Studies, I sincerely, heartily, happily welcome you. I understand the time constraint. As far as timings is concerned, this is in India, it is morning, and it's at midnight in Canada. But despite these constraints, you have very happily and kindly agreed to deliver the keynote address of today's international conference, as it has been presented and submitted by our Honorable Minister, that across the globe so many activities are going on, and role of the state is really undergoing major transition and transformation, and across the globe as well as regionally in South Asia. With this, I will request Professor T.V. Paul, who is a very good friend of mine. I had the opportunity to visit his department and university in 2015, and we spent some time during the day in the department and outside. Perhaps T.V. Paul will remember. And I look forward to your visit in Kolkata in the near future also, and that time physically we can hold another program. With this, Professor T.V. Paul, please deliver your keynote address, and the floor is yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's right. It's 1:41 a.m. and Professor Kothari woke me up, which is okay. I sometimes get up early because I guess sometimes the temperatures are different in the morning here. It is really great to be joining you today. I know it's your important gathering. And let me thank, I think the minister has left, but even if he has left, he's very active, I guess. And Professor Gotani, Vice Chancellor, a number of your colleagues there. I think I know some of you. And yes, I remember your visit. It is a pleasure to reconnect again. So, as some of you might have seen, I did a edited book on South Asia's weak states. So I'll bring up some of those themes, but try to see how states are doing in the region in different dimensions of state capacity. And as we know, South Asia has some 8 states, which I think is a problematic assumption. Why do we have only 8 states? But anyway, they're members of this ARC. If you put the population size, it's about 1.89, 1.9. That's 1/4 of the world population. And densely populated, multi-ethnic, multi-religious. All this is known, but what was impressive was the GDP nominal growth of the region. 1918 was 3.46 trillion in purchasing power parity. Now, unfortunately, as you all experiencing, the GDP of every country is coming down, and I have a feeling that South Asia will be hit the hardest of all the regions, perhaps Africa, another one, because the moment economic decline happens, it's very hard to bring it back unless substantial policy initiatives come out of the state, as government as well as private individuals. So when we talk about the subsystem, South Asia as a subsystem or a region, I define this in my own work as a geographical cluster of states that approximate to each other and thus are interconnected in spatial and cultural terms. Now, one should acknowledge that the definition of a region, or what we call a region, tends to change historically, along with imperial powers and their interest. So South Asia, as you know, included many parts of Burma today, or Myanmar, Afghanistan at various points. The Mughal Empire had a lot of those regions under its control. And I was surprised, or not surprised, when you visit your own state areas. India was controlled from Calcutta. India, or British India controlled Singapore, was controlled from Calcutta or Shimla, more accurately. And you notice that at that time, the British did not consider Singapore beyond this region. You know, it was like that in the sense from the imperial powers' interest. So great powers in the past determined, but South Asia today, I'm sure, is very much a security complex, a regional subsystem, because there is some kind of interdependence among states in both security, culture, although economic interdependence is very low. Now, almost all states came out of the decolonization process. New states, old cultures, difficulties with the state formation and consolidation. State and nation are incongruent in some countries. It is geographically India-centric. 70% of the land mass population lie with India. So that's why Indian subcontinent, some call it a hegemonic subsystem. As you notice, that's being broken by China. And I must say that today, if you ask other countries of the region, even before, they were very uncomfortable with the idea of Indian hegemony. But the idea of hegemony today is very, very problematic, as China has entered in a very big way. You have a number of divisions in the region based on religious, ethnic, other identities. And there is lopsided capacity of the states. Some had secessionist movements. And that's one major change, as a recent article in in the Carnegie Foundation webpage by a professor from Chicago, Paul Steinlad, argue that the South Asian states are now a lot more successful in suppressing almost all, some incorporating, some settling the secessionist movements. Of course, Kashmir and minor parts of Northeast are still continuing, but it is one of the big changes that people are noticing. So the region has a number of challenges. I won't go into all of them. You know that ecological challenges, all the Indian cities, as I'm a regular visitor, they are on top of the world map for air pollution and other ecological challenges. The current corona crisis, a pandemic crisis, is ongoing, so we can only make some arguments based on our understanding as it is today. And one thing is very clear: the poorest are the worst affected. But one thing I read that the middle class, the Indian middle class size was increasing slowly, incrementally. Now, many in the middle class will go to the lower middle class, and the lower middle class to the very poor. And that is a very sad thing for people like us, because we were hoping for a trajectory of linear progression and growth and transformation of the subcontinent after centuries of suffering of the poor in particular. So this is a very, very difficult time, and you in person are experiencing it. We have in the developed countries are also experiencing it, but a lot less in terms of fear. Canada in particular will return because it has a lot of resources and policy agility too. Now, when talk about the South Asian conflict, why is there conflict? There are explanations out there: irreconcilable national identities, lack of political development, weak economies, unsettled territorial disputes, lack of regional institutions, etc. But I want to focus on two critical factors: the presence of weak states and weak cooperative interstate norms. And so this is also factors I used in previous work, but recent this foreign policy index, it's called Foreign Policy Magazine, has an index. And in 2006, at least 5 South Asian states were in the top 25 weakest states in an annual index of 120 countries: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. But by 2019, this has changed. Only Afghanistan and Pakistan are in the top 21st in 120. So Afghanistan is 9, Pakistan is 23, and Nepal is 45, Sri Lanka 46, India 74 out of 120, which means that fragile states that is changing a little bit. States are no longer that weak in South Asia. When we say weak, it's quite a bit of a Weberian understanding too, because the state has become stronger with the coercive power, and quite a bit of development is taking place too, I guess, as a result of the insertion into globalization. Now, still the region has considerable challenges when it comes to human development indexes. I don't need to talk about some 12 factors, including security threats, economic implosion, human rights, refugee flows, sanitation, water, health, education. A lot of these are part of their metrics, which UNDP uses. Despite that, the fact that we were witnessing this slow but steady improvements in many of those parameters, not all of them definitely. Quality of life is something that one can argue whether it has improved or not. Questionable some indicators, but many indicators it doesn't look that like quality of life in South Asia as a whole, except maybe pockets of states, Bhutan or places like Sri Lanka show a lot more quality of life than others. So what is state capacity? The state capacity is the ability of, this is again my own definition I pulled from various sources, the ability of a state to develop and implement policies in order to provide collective goods such as security, order, and welfare to citizens in a legitimate and effective manner, untrammeled by internal or external actors. So state capacity is not just the ability to provide order or security alone, but welfare too. This is a big change from the old idea of state capacity. The old idea of state capacity was basically to protect the borders and suppress against any kind of internal threats. So welfare was included as a result of transformation in the idea of what a state is supposed to do. So there are three deficiencies when we say states suffer security, participation, infrastructure. Now, weakness does not mean all states are failed states. I would say that that notion of failure is a very problematic one. It's like not failing in an examination. And so some people use it now, the better term is fragile states. And then you can talk about a very weak state or weak state, and then strong weak state. So one can categorize, I guess the fragile state, probably Afghanistan is today still persisting, given that the central government does not often have control over some 40% of the territory of the state. Most other states have improved, and India is probably the strong/weak state in some sense, but others have improved their positions to some extent. So how does a weak state affect the security for itself as well as for others? The causal linkages have been studied. Cal Holsty has a very good book on the subject. So states have to face what you call the state strength dilemma, which is in order to become strong, state use coercive measures. And when they use coercion, there is resistance. And resistance creates more coercion. And there's the cyclical pattern of coercion and violence. And that has been a pattern because many active secessionist or irredentist movements continue to happen in a weak state. Sometimes weak states can externalize their internal conflicts. We know that Pakistan does that often. And weak states are also arenas of major power intervention and competition. So great powers are players more than sometimes we want. So there are three levels of conflict. One can look at interstate, intrastate, and human security areas. And South Asia has all of them, as you know, the interstate conflict, India-Pakistan, India-China. The current one is India-China, which everybody is watching with great anxiety, where it is leading. And then you have quite a bit of intrastate conflict, and that is actually where what is changing to some extent. Less terrorism activity as far as the terrorism portal, South Asia terrorism portal shows the number is declining. And even secessionist movement, the Tamil movement was suppressed. The Naxalite movement probably is still ongoing, but much less visible here today. And but one thing is the increasing intolerance towards minorities is happening in almost all South Asian states, which is one of the perhaps a depressing part of South Asian development, ethnic, religious nationalism, and a kind of mobilization taking place on the basis of those various. Obviously, human security implies people's freedom from both violent and non-violent threats. The people are the point of reference. And so this is where states, again, in South Asia and many parts of the world, including the United States, tends to fail, making that good connection between human security and state security. The issue is that internal conflicts take up a lot of efforts in South Asian states. Poverty reduction, life expectancy, all there are improvements. Literacy, GDP. One crisis like this global crisis can wipe out the progress. This is a major problem because now the states don't have money as far as we know, and they'll have to borrow. And how will they invest in a number of areas such as ecological or water deficiency or poverty, etc. So this is life expectancy in the region had gone up and substantially. I think India is 69 years, Sri Lanka is 76. This is 2017. It will be very sad if those parameters of minimal achievements have taken place will decline as a result of this humongous virus that is going through the subcontinent, all of the world. Now, the India-Pakistan conflict is one of the most enduring ones. You have some 4 wars and several dozens of interstate crises. Nuclear deterrence is present, but there is stability, instability paradox. Stability at the strategic level, but high level of instability. And in recent years, you hear the notion of first use coming in, or cheap talk on nuclear use. Pawana in January 2019, Balakot, some compliance efforts in Pakistan often makes these loose talks. Not just Pakistan, by the way, all the nuclear states, especially US under Trump, have been making loose nuclear talks, affecting the whole notion of nuclear taboo or the traditional non-use. I won't go into Kashmir disputes much, but clearly you all know what's going on. Enduring rivalry is a theoretical construct IR people have developed, characterized by strategic competitions involving the same pair of states with multiple crises and wars that extend a long period of time, over a generation or more. And you have several militarized disputes and societal level conflict with zero-sum perspectives. One of the interesting thing is this, people, South Asia are states following a kind of realist canon. This idea of balance of power, deterrence, these are realist ideas. And what is interesting is balance of power, I've written some recent works on this, is evoked a lot. Pakistan in particular wants to equalize power because they think that balance of power is a truth. It is a contested term. So they need all this military capability to prevent India from attacking or feared attack, which is quite a bit of sometimes illusion. But the point is, balance of power is very powerful. And now we hear a lot about the China-India balance, whether India has enough capability to balance China, rising powerful China, and what sort of instruments India has, including the notion of soft balancing using institutions and limited alignments, limited engagement with other powers. So India is forming these strategic partnerships, as we notice most recently with Australia and France, etc., Japan in particular, but not a hard balancing coalition with military coordination or joint operations. So that is a transforming area in South Asia. And the world balance of power today is in flux. And obviously, India's position as a swing state becoming very important. Even though India's capabilities are sometimes questionable in some areas, improving but not sufficient to still play this great power role beyond the region. Occasionally, India sends ships to South China Sea and places, but that's not enough. The capacity to influence outcomes beyond its immediate region is what determines a great power. So, unfortunately, policymakers as well as scholars, the subcontinent, sometimes make this claim India has already arrived. arrived in some sense, but not clearly yet. It's a very tenuous situation. And India obviously has a role to play, big power contestation. It has to play it very carefully. It's too bad the minister has left, because great power competition offers both opportunities and constraints. Opportunities not just for security, but for economic development. So China is today what it is because the United States, Nixon and Kissinger opened up for security reasons, not out of any love for the Chinese, by the way. And that was to balance Soviet Union. And the Chinese very cleverly, Deng Xiaoping, used that to get the market access to the United States, other Western countries, and even Japan and countries. This is what India is in a situation today. In other words, security, cooperation, alignment, strategic partnership should be a great opportunity to gain. Conflict, if you want to include Kashmir and these connections. And then you also have human security issues, all interconnected with the refugee flow, for instance. China-Indian rivalry was a managed rivalry, as I said, because of the different agreements and the principles with respect to engagement. Now the use of firearms is slowly happened, although I don't think they shot at each other, but at least the fact that it was kind of forbidden in the previous conflict, even at Doklam. And so this has been a big change, and the escalation tendencies may be happening. But one thing is very clear that people, again, I have done some work on the notion of international status. It's a sociological concept. And it is a status conflict that the problem for the Chinese as a swing state and a powerful state, India is the only one that has a singular capacity to at least resist the Chinese intrusion into the Indian subcontinent as well as beyond. And India as a swing state can also form coalitions. So China is trying to contest not just the border, but also India's status. India is competing, at least hope to compete with China for international status. And the Chinese somehow thinks that by pulling down, showing India as a weak state, and also dividing the conflict between China and Pakistan, India will not get there. So there is an effort in terms of status competition, and status is a big part of this rivalry, which again, our scholars haven't paid enough attention. Even with Pakistan, by the way, the Pakistan conflict is a status conflict too. I also have some ideas in the book I did called Warrior State, where this aspect is discussed. Now, the other part of this whole South Asia situation with China is the entry of South China into South Asia, these South Asian states, as an economic and security player. This is a past 10 years development. Now, all the states South Asia have leading trading as well as investment is coming from China. And India is trying, but obviously there are limitations. And there are some capacity building in China is doing, and one has to be appreciative of the fact that infrastructure development was neglected by other previous great powers. And this is where I think the Chinese have an advantage. They can build things fast, but a kind of Chiaxia or tributary model may be developing in South Asia, because Chinese realize that once you have a dependency relationship, the small states will have to kowtow to the Chinese as in the previous historical eras. But then the small states are carefully, so far so good in terms of security cooperation. Gives a military base such as Sri Lanka or Myanmar or Nepal or any of the countries, it will definitely have attract other countries such as the United States will then be threatened, and India will definitely be threatened. So, but if the countries become extremely dependent, Sri Lanka to lease its port. And this is a challenge that Indian security planners have to, I'm sure they're thinking about it, but it will be a major challenge if and also the whole Iran situation with respect to the Chabahar port. So the Chinese are definitely, once they get that warm water or so-called, this was the dream of Imperial Russia, but never happened. And now the Chinese are successful in creating that CPEC road and the port access. And I hear there is one through Thailand, they're planning to create access to Bay of Bengal. Some of these create choking points for India, but that's again a very disputed whether the Straits of Malacca can actively be used for choking, or how long you can choke. All these are important. And if China manages to have a navy that's 7 times larger than India's at some point, or much larger, or closer to the US, the US Navy is right now the superior part of its power capability. So now the major powers have done sometimes very active intervention in the region, but they are players, as we know, Afghanistan, Pakistan area. And Cold War time, India tried to avoid entanglement. But what is differentiating today is, during the Cold War, India was a weak state, didn't have the material capacities, more potential to play this big role. Of course, it had the potential, but it didn't want to, fearing imperial domination. But I think that today the difference is Again, a structural change. The region has a lot more importance given the Chinese BRI and military planning and expansionist ideas. So what we are seeing is great powers are competing. Naval presence in the Indian Ocean bound to increase. The Quad is interesting development, self-balancing through institutional strategic partnerships. But nothing is concretized. There is no NATO. There is no bilateral alignment either. Partly because it is hard for a country like India to form a military alliance unless threatened. So I would say it is the Chinese may not push too hard, fearing that India will form a military alliance with the United States. But the Chinese will push up to the edge to prevent India or to kind of create a situation where India is not able to join us. So wedge strategy, the Chinese strategy is a wedge strategy, creating wedge among India's alliances as well as India itself. These are grand strategy ideas that the Chinese have borrowed from their own history, by the way. People sometimes, I've been reading Sun Tzu recently, and this current crisis is very much written there, that when your enemy is weak, go and strike. I guess that's a military old idea. The cooperation pattern is challenging in the region. SARC. Part of it is there is very little product specialization. What can basmati rice is Pakistan's export. India has that plenty. Cotton, clothes, industrial. I mean, there are some products like cement and stuff like that, but clearly the region is not specialized enough for countries to import and export. And then you have quite a bit of problems. Border controls are still going on. SAFTA, I don't think has taken up that much. So the three mechanisms, the Kantian mechanisms for peace, economic interdependence, democracies don't fight each other idea. Then you have finally institutions, regions. All the three are somewhat weak in the region. So if you want to get a security community, a peaceful security community idea, you really need these three instruments. They are liberal instruments, but they have a lot of value. And in East Asia, Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries have all the three except democracy in the good sense. And East Asia too, quite a bit of economic interdependence. Institutions are weak, and democracy is somewhat weak because except Japan and Korea, no, not many. And that is the reason why you have a partial peace. You don't have a deep peace, or a shallow peace is what we are seeing in these regions. So there's a lot more room there, but I think India is transcending this region to make itself global power with some success and some constraints. Now, how do we build peace in the region? I think quite a bit is going to depend on the three elements I mentioned. And the democratic deficit is going to be a challenge. Electoral democracies, they all have elections, even Pakistan. But there is a kind of illiberal ideas are penetrating in the region. As a result, they are not liberal democratic states. It's considerable majoritarianism. And is making strong democratic norms. Democracies, as we know, have better relations among themselves, even small states versus big states. And until you have a region with strong democratic norms, democratic idea of engagement, you may have a problem with respect to deep peace or peace that is for a long, durable peace. So economic interdependence, very little intrastate trade, then the economic growth factor is now going to pull it down. We don't know whether it will create more pressures for refugee flow. I'm pretty sure internal displacements are massively happening. as the movement of labor from manual labor from different states and cities happened during the past lockdown. And this has quite a bit of implications. If you have prolonged periods of suffering, how do people respond to that? And the question of SARC, whether it should be revitalized. You probably better judge on that. Why we don't have, after that initial enthusiasm for a SARC fund for dealing with this crisis, how activities, I don't know. And so it could definitely emerge. And so finally, let me stop by arguing that the post-corona dynamics will depend on state capacity, state's ability to use resources across various regions and states. How do we move the middle or lower income to the middle class, or the poor to the middle class? And this is a big issue. And whether you will have more lockdowns needed if the crisis continues. Long-term impact on infrastructural power of the state and human development index is likely to go downward. Educational sector, employment sector, badly going to be hurt. And the China-India rivalry's impact on small states and the Belt and Road initiative, will it lead to a debt trap despite improvements in selective infrastructure projects? And then the US-China competition is going to affect the region also if India takes a position, which it will have to. Will it become the Cold War, US-Soviet Cold War type, or will it be a new Cold War? Potentially a new Cold War given the economic relationship. The Soviets had very little economic relationship with the Western Bloc. And so it's a very complex system emerging. And what you notice, the interaction between state capacity, international factors, and transnational threats, the interstate conflict in between. So multiple sources of challenges, and but there are some opportunities too, if in particular if there is a solution to this pandemic crisis. So let me stop there. I guess I took at least half an hour more. So I appreciate your time and wish you all success with your, looks like a very 92 people are on board today, and hopefully your conference will be very successful.
Yes, thank you, Professor Paul, for a very wonderful presentation. And you have very rightly touched upon some of the very pertinent and key issues centering around South Asia. You have focused on the China factor in world politics, that how the situation in the coming years is going to evolve, and what are the constraints before Indian foreign policy, how India should move forward. And one important part of your presentation, which is the need of the hour, according to me also, that is the revitalizing SARC as the regional organization. As though initially, as you rightly said, that we took some measures in the form of generating some funds to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and so on. But SARC needs to be really revitalized as far as South Asia is concerned, as far as India is concerned. And economically, also because of COVID-19 pandemic, very rightly that all states, including India, are rightly facing numerous changes and challenges. So we need to take into account multiple factors in the arena of world politics when we talk of India's foreign policy, when we talk of changing the nature of the changing role of the state in the COVID-19 pandemic, and so on and so forth. So with this, TV Paul, Professor TV Paul, I sincerely, happily, heartily thank you for being so kind enough, despite, as I said, the time constraints. And yesterday also you had to get up because there was some...
That was my mistake.
There was some clash of dates as far as Canada and India is concerned. And sir, one humble request that when you visit your India and Kolkata next time, just we'll be in touch with you so that we can physically hold one program on our Bips platform. Because this time virtual mode, we really appreciate your gesture and keenness and support, but definitely we look forward to hold some program in the near future. Thank you, Professor Paul.
Thank you very much.
And now we are at the fag end of this session. I would invite my colleague and friend Abhishek to give a vote of thanks to the honorable participants and the speakers of this session. Abhishek, please come forward.
Thank you, sir. Very good morning to all of you. It is really a great pleasure and huge honor to us for us to have such a rich and distinguished personalities with us here in the platform of Bengal Institute of Political Studies. Your august presence and stream of wisdom has really enriched us, all of us. So, on behalf of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, I would like to convey our gratitude to all honorable speakers, especially our honorable ministers, Sri Muralidharan, Minister of State for External Affairs. Thank you, sir, for your kind consent. And we know that despite having a busy schedule, you have extended your kind hand to inaugurate our today's session, our today's Maha Saga or Maha event. I would also like to convey our cordial gratitude to Professor T.V. Paul. As you all know, our President sir has already said that in Canada it is almost midnight to 2 a.m. Midnight 2 a.m. Still, sir, you have taken the responsibility to deliver the keynote address. So we acknowledge your sense of commitment to the broader discipline, sir. Thank you very much from the bottom of our hand, of our heart. And I would also like to convey our cordial gratitude to all the participants who are here. And I can see that so many distinguished personalities are here with us since morning. So I am really thankful to all of you, all participants. Really thank you from the core of our heart. And thank you for making it a grand success. Now, our next session is going to be commenced. That is our first business session. And I would like to invite Professor Devashish Mundi, Joint Secretary of Bengal Institute of Political Studies, to conduct this session. Please, over to Professor Devashish Mundi.
So thank you all. I need to get back to
sir.
sleep. I have
Yes.
more engagement in the morning.
Yes.
Thank you for the trouble, sir.
Professor Paul, just do let us know when your next plan
Yes,
to visit
I
India,
will be definitely happy to come.
so that we can really thank from on behalf of Bengal Institute of Political
Okay,
Studies.
all the
Thank
best to you for the next proceedings.
Sure,
Sir. Thank you.
Look forward.
Thank you.
Devashish,
Very,
Devashish, are you there? Yeah.
Yes. Very good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to convey my special thanks to all of the distinguished speakers, distinguished persons, and participants. This is really immense pleasure for Bips that we have organized such type of mega event today. And now I am starting the first business session of this international webinar. In this session, we have 3 distinguished speakers and 1 chairperson, and I am welcoming all of you. And Professor, I would like to convey my special thanks to Professor Martin Malik, Institute for Security and Strategic Studies, National Defense Academy here in Australia. He is the chairperson of this session, and I would like to welcome to Professor Obiruk Sarkar. He is the renowned economist and professor of Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, and Professor Ganga Thapa from University of Tribhuvan, Kathmandu, Nepal, and Professor C. Binodan. He is the professor in the Department of International Relations, Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala. We are lucky enough today, really. These 3 distinguished speakers have agreed, despite of their busy schedules, to speak something before us. And today we have already successfully completed our first session. Honorable Deputy Prime Minister Mr. Modi sir was there, and TV Paul, an eminent South Asian scholar, expert was there. And with these few words, I would like to request Professor Martin Malik to start the session as a chairperson. Professor Malik, now floor is yours.
Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation to chair this panel, and especially to Professor Kothari. I'm glad to get in touch with the Indian colleagues and other. Again, I visited Bengal exactly 2 years ago at the invitation of the Bengal Institute for Political Studies, and now, unfortunately, we meet only online, given the known difficult circumstances. But it's better, of course, than not to meet at all. I'm senior researcher of the National Defense Academy in Vienna, Austria, and state theories and state failing have been among my most important research and work topics for many years. So please let me say a few words from a Central European perspective on the subject of our event, Changing Role of the State amidst New Global Disorder. It affects extremely important questions, possibly even the most important problems of the present day, also and especially in view of the worldwide coronavirus pandemic, which nobody could have foreseen only 9 months ago. The financial crisis from 2008 onwards already brought the state back into the game, so to speak. The state rescued banks, stabilized markets, etc. In this context, the state became one of the topics also increasingly discussed again by the social sciences, with political science among them, of course. It is likely to follow, or has already begun, in view of the virtually global crisis caused by the rapid spread of the coronavirus from China starting at the beginning of 2020, since the nation state, also and especially in EU member states, suddenly ordered measures to its citizens in the interest of public health that had been completely unthinkable shortly before. Restrictions on exit cultural institutions, shops, businesses, and public authorities, which led to the bankruptcy and collapse of many companies, and thus the sudden unemployment of many of their employees, and so on. Borders were also closed between European member states, bringing to a halt the otherwise large flow of foreign tourists to Austria. Even the quite prosperous Central European states were forced to take out huge loans to finance these public obligations. And in many cities, the police was and is still much more present and visible than ever before in order to enforce the numerous regulations imposed by the government and the state. Some observers immediately saw an extension of state sovereignty, which had been downplayed in political science, at least in many Western countries, considered less and less relevant or even missing for many years. Through biopolitics, because of the pandemic, it was feared that states could use the coronavirus crisis as a pretext to obtain more data on their own and foreign citizens, specifically concerning their state of health. In addition, various public intellectuals, such, for example, the German philosopher Peter Sloterdijk, warned that medicine would become an accomplice of a totalitarian policy which would establish the total modern security state, unquote. However, such statements revealed less about the factual situation than about their authors, who obviously lack historical and political knowledge and do not know what totalitarianism and security states really are. Many voices are in Western Europe, also warned against renationalization and end of globalization, etc. And now we look forward for a fruitful exchange of opinions. The first speaker of this panel, as already had been said, is Professor Avirup Shakar, renowned economist from the Indian Statistical Institute. Please take the floor.
Professor Avirup Shakar, please, sir. Avirup da. Hello, sir.
Professor Shakar, are you ready? Professor Shakar, I see a sign on the screen.
Yes, I can also see, but somehow maybe right now he's not available. So in that case, you move on to the next.
I'm trying. Just give me 1 minute.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Just 1 minute.
Professor Shakar has left.
আপনাকে ডাকছে just half minute. He wanted to get only half minute.
In half a minute?
Okay.
30 seconds he wanted.
Okay, we are waiting. Oh, no problem.
Wait half a minute, that's no problem.
Oh, half minutes means 30 seconds. Sorry. Because he lost his connectivity.
No issue, we are waiting. Vishwanath, don't worry.
অভিষেক একটু দেখবে?
Yes, sir, I'm trying, sir.
দাঁড়াও, তাহলে ওনাকে জিজ্ঞেস করিনি। আচ্ছা, তাহলে কি একজনকে শুরু করে দিবে, মানে বক্তা একজনকে? আচ্ছা, ঠিক যা ঢুকে যাচ্ছে।
আমি সেটাই বলছি। Professor Malik, please call upon the next speaker, please.
No, he request me, please.
Okay.
Because Avirup Shakar request me just, he is now available. Please, Avirup.
Professor Shakar, are you ready?
I'm ready now. I must apologize for my bad connection, for my bad internet connection. I have changed to a different connection now, and hopefully it will work. So, how much time do I have for my talk?
According to the schedule, we have 22 minutes. Is it okay for you?
Okay, 20 minutes should be fine. 20 minutes. Okay. I will
please take the floor.
Yeah, okay. Sure. So, let me start by thanking the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak here. In a sense, I'm an outsider among political scientists. I'm an economist by training. So I will be talking what I actually know. I will be talking about economics all the time, but I believe that the present crisis, apart from the medical crisis, there is a huge economic crisis leading to political implications, of course, which I'll touch upon later, but I will start with the economic crisis. Now, to put things into perspective, let me start by saying that even before the COVID crisis had raised its ugly head, an economic crisis had already started, had already set in. The Indian economy was in the grip of a recession. So, if you look at the data in 2016-17, the growth rate was much higher, about 9.5%. And gradually it came down to 4.5% in 1920, in the fourth quarter of 2019 to 2019 and 2020. So there was a constant fall in the rate of growth. Now, the COVID crisis certainly has to be is adding to this problem, of course, but we need to put the COVID crisis in the long run perspective. For that, we need to understand why growth rate was falling in the first place. So why to start with, growth rate was falling? This is something that we need to understand. Now, there was a temporary fall, of course, due to demonetization. Demonetization was a big shock which came in 2017, 2016, late 2016, but it showed up in the data for 2017-18, and there was a temporary fall. But then growth rate picked up. It picked up, but I will argue that it's kind of illusory. The picking up of growth rate, the temporary picking up of growth rate was kind of illusory. And after that temporary increase, again it started falling. So what was the problem? Some people argue that the international market was the real cause. There was contraction of trade in the international market. A tariff war was going on between China and the US. Generally, there was there was Brexit, of course, and there was a general sentiment towards anti-globalization all over the world. And this affected the Indian economy as well, because the Indian economy is not insulated from the rest of the world like it used to be. Now, that explanation, I think it's not a full explanation of the falling growth rate for the following reason. If we look at the export data, there were fluctuations in exports over these years, but there was no significant fall in the rate of growth of exports. So, exports alone cannot explain the fall in the rate of growth. One has to look for other explanations. Now, another explanation is sometimes provided in terms of an unstable financial sector in the Indian economy, unstable financial markets. Banks had hugely piled up bad loans, NPAs as they are called, non-performing assets. So banks had hugely piled up bad loans, and as a result, they just got nervous and they were unwilling to give further loans, to make further advances to the industrial sector. And as a consequence, there was, the growth rate was thwarted. That's another explanation. Again, I think this is not the right explanation, because if you look at the data, you will find that there was a lot of excess capacity in the industrial sector. Firms had piled up stocks. They were unable to sell what they had already produced. So, true that banks were giving less advances than before, but it was due to the demand problem. People, the firms were simply unwilling to take more loans. Why? Because there was not sufficient demand for their products. So it all boils down to a demand problem. Basically, products that were produced did not find a market, could not find a buyer So it was a buyer side problem. The question is, why was there a buyer side problem? Now you see, the big shock, there were two basic reasons. One short-run shock and one long-term trend. Let me talk about the long-term trend first. If you look at the long-term trend of the Indian economy, you will find that during the period, this is a recent paper. There was a recent paper by Chancel and Piketty, 2017. Now, they calculated that over the period 1951 to 1980, there was a sharp fall in inequality. The poorest 50% of the population was growing their income, per capita income per year, was growing at a rate of 2.2%, while the top 10% had a growth of only 1.2%. And the topmost 0.001% of the population had actually a decline in their income. So inequality was falling over these years. Also, growth rate was low. So 1951 to 80 was a period of low growth and low inequality. In contrast, 1980 to 2015, there was globalization. India opened up. And as a result, growth rate definitely improved. But there was also a rise in inequality. During this period, the poorest, income of the poorest bottom 50% was growing at 1.9% compared to the 2.2% in the previous period. The top 10% experienced a growth of 5.1% compared to the previous 1.2%. And the topmost 0.001% experienced a growth of 9.4% compared with their decline at the rate of 2%. So clearly, during the later period, growth picked up, but along with it, there was a rise of inequality. Now, this rise in inequality had a consequence for demand. People, may I just make a request? People who are busy with their phones, could you just unmute your video so that otherwise I get very much distracted. Professor Kothari, I can see you talking over the phone, but when I'm speaking, it becomes very difficult for me to concentrate. Professor Rajkumar Kothari, please. May I request you to shut off your video, please? Otherwise, I can't speak. Let me stop there. Professor Kothari, please.
Rajkumar, please.
See, Professor Kothari, I'm very sorry, but when I'm speaking, if someone is just on his phone, I just can't speak. I just cannot concentrate. So if you just put off your video, it would be very nice.
Please close your video. Rajkumar, close your video.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So what I was saying was that this rising inequality had a toll on demand. Why? Because it is the poor people who are the bigger spenders. The rich, they save. And even when they spend on imports, goods that are imported from Europe or from the US or from other countries. So, you see, the point is that with inequality rising, income that went into the hands of the poor, relatively speaking, came down, and therefore total spending was also coming down. And that took its toll on demand. So this is one aspect. The other aspect is demonetization. Demonetization had hurt the informal sector, the so-called unorganized informal sector, which constitutes, we don't know, there are various estimates from 85% to 93% of the economy. The informal sector was hurt, in a much intense fashion than the formal sector. And most of the poor earn their living in the informal sector. As a result, again, there was a lack of demand. Now, the data showed that there was a temporary rise in the growth rate. But as I said, it's illusory because when we calculate growth rates, usually we don't make a survey of the informal sector every year. What we assume is that there is a proportional relationship between the formal sector and the informal sector. Now, it happened that the formal sector picked up very quickly after demonetization, but the informal sector did not. So the proportionality that was assumed was wrong. It could not be assumed. So basically, the decline of the informal sector showed up in terms of lack of demand, and that led to a falling growth rate. In this perspective, if you look at the COVID crisis, it has hit the informal sector much more severely than the formal sector. As a result, this is one more shock to demand. Now, I'm saying this because now we come to public policy. Public policy that has been announced by the finance minister basically concentrates on the supply side. It talks about giving loans at cheaper interest rates to various small, medium, and marginal units. Now, how far marginal units will get the loan, we don't know because they don't have the right security, they don't have the right credit history, and so on. So banks would hesitate to give loans to these units, but maybe the small and medium would get some loans. But in an environment where firms cannot sell their products, it's very unlikely that firms will actually take loans, even if they are available at lower rates of interest. So I think the first thing is that it's important to manage the demand side, the lack of buyers, the problem of lack of demand in the market. That problem has to be tackled instead of concentrating on the supply side. This is one. The second is that, of course, some economists have talked about direct subsidy given to the poor, and that will probably boost up demand. Just give subsidy, give money to the poor, and who have lost their livelihood, and it is argued that that will boost up demand. Now, here, my feeling is that one has to make a distinction between survival and revival. For survival, when a person is starving, yes, you need to give money, you need to give free rations, you need to give all sorts of supports. But that is for survival. But for revival of the economy, you can hardly sustain a revival by giving constant, by making constant transfers to the less privileged. Instead, what you need to do is you need to spend more on infrastructure, for example. That will improve the productivity of the economy, and it will also make private investment more lucrative. So if the government had taken policies of investing big amounts in the infrastructure of the economy, as our honorable Prime Minister was talking about in his last Independence Day lecture, he did talk about investing a lot in the infrastructure sector, and that was echoed in the consequent budget, union budget. But now we don't hear anything about such expenditure. I think spending on infrastructure will have two effects. One is it will directly create jobs, but those are productive jobs. And second, it will make the private sector investments more productive. So it will probably bring in more private sector investment. Investment is falling in these circumstances, and it will get a boost. That's one thing. The other thing that public policy, is talking about is, well, see, the problem is that government expenditure has increased, no doubt about that. How to finance government expenditure? Now, the union government is talking about selling of public assets like coal mines, airports, and some of the government-owned firms and so on, to get some money to fund this, extraordinary situation. Now, my feeling is that selling of public assets, this is not the right time to sell public assets. Why? Because you will get a very low price. All over the world, it will be very hard to get a good buyer. So you will be, if your process of selling coal mines has already started, but my fear is that you will get very low price for these coal mines. You will be selling off national assets at throwaway prices. Instead, it's better if the government had resorted to more public borrowing. Union government is talking about borrowing. It's allowing the states to borrow more. Their, restriction of 3%. They could borrow 3% of their state domestic product previously. Now it has been increased to 5%. So the states are being allowed to borrow more. So why not the union government itself borrow more from the market? This is one. And the other is that certainly there are a large number of, in absolute terms, not in relative terms, but in absolute terms, there are a large number of super rich in the economy. Why not taxing the super rich? Just increase taxation on the super rich. Instead, the government reduced corporate tax with the hope that investment would be forthcoming. Now, you see, if you reduce corporate tax, it will increase profits, or at least it will protect profit, but there is no evidence anywhere in the literature that it has any effect on investment. Investment has got to do how you can sell your goods, how you are perceiving the future. So I think that is roughly all I need to say. In a nutshell, the government should concentrate on the demand side by spending more on infrastructure, and it should refrain from selling public assets at throwaway prices during this period of crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sharkar. It was especially great to have you here because I have, by the way, in Central Europe as well, especially here, I have the strong impression that political scientists sometimes disregard the meaning of economic factors, and therefore it was very interesting to hear your overview about recent developments of the Indian economy. Some or many of the problems you have touched upon are very, very important for us in Europe as well. For example, the rising inequality. This problem is discussed all the time, and of course it's political consequences, or consequences even on the stability of the democratic system. And then you said, among other important things, that it is not the right time to sell public assets now, because you would achieve only a very modest price. This is again very, very significant for Europe and Austria as well. We had similar issues to discuss. Thank you very much again. The next speaker on my list is Professor Ganga Thapa from Tribhuvan University in Nepal. Professor Thapa, please, the floor is yours. Professor Thapa, can you hear me? Professor Tapas, I can hear you. Unmute yourself. Thapa, please unmute yourself. There is a button, microphone button, please unmute yourself.
Okay, it's
Now
done.
we can
It's done.
hear.
Professor Thapa?
Yes, we can hear now. Professor Thapa, go on.
Yeah. Okay. You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Malik. Let me thank to the organizer, in particular Professor Rajkumar Kothari, Vishnunath Chakrabarti, Professor Devashish Nandi, and Professor Pratita Mukherjee, and Abhishek, and many other friends for the invitation. I am really honored and overwhelmed. Before I start my presentation, let me quickly endorse some of the points raised by previous speakers, particularly honorable ministers, who was talking about the new nationalism. Also, you are talking about the economic inequalities. Also, you are talking about the inability of the liberal political order to address the situation. And Professor Paul also, he was making many good points, but I like to endorse. He was talking about the democratic ideas and values. Also, you know that he was talking about that SAC can be a platform for collective preferences and political responsiveness. Similarly, my predecessor, the presenters also, he was talking about the economic inequality. These are the issues which we can discuss for a long time, and these are very particular issues that it seems to me that I think Professor Paul also was raising that some kind of that welfare state is required to tackle the situation. I agree with him that that I'm also feeling that some kind of majoritarian type of political system, that first past the system, maybe they are not working, and the recent COVID exposed all the developed democracy and aspiring democracy. We all know that. And with that said, let me start. Before we start, also it is very good to meet Professor Tulsidas, Professor Dharmar, Professor R.P. Pradhan, and many other friends through these webinars. So my topic is globalization, the agents of good governance. It is a much talked about issue in political science, even social science, even in economics. It's a very common subject. Everybody knows about it. But first, I must admit at the very outset that globalization has come to mean to so many different things to so many different peoples. Initially, globalization was confined to improvement in transportation, improvement in communications, improvement in technologies. Just to quote J. Bhagavati, he has written in his book In Defense of Globalization. He was talking about the 18th century, 19th century globalization. It was confined only to 3 areas. Now, today, globalization driven much more by political change, policy changes, that initiated by the governments, focusing on human welfare. This is a very unique development, very, very, very progressive development. But the proliferation of network markets, evolution in global information technology, in the end of Cold War, and increasingly involved non-state actors in public policy affairs, including global affairs, all contribute to globalization. And globalization naturally brings people closure, community closure, people, community, society, and ideas closure in an area in which issues calls for international cooperation, collaboration, and attention. I also quote Mr. Kofi Annan, the former US UN Secretary General, who has rightly acknowledged that locality, however powerful, can protect itself on its own. He further says that the threats we face are interconnected. I think he has rightly mentioned that. If he has rightly mentioned that this means to cooperative and competitive interdependency among sovereign states and transnational corporations and networking of experts in civil society. This is the latest. Of course, globalization has different characters. And it is more known to by, that increasing trade, increasing capital flows, and diffuse extensively dissemination of ideas and norms to the community as a whole, and to the people who comprise it, and to the global community. This is a very revolutionary development in the past few years, and also it is irreversible. And in some way or other, people are benefiting this kind of globalization and democratization. Of course, governance means also the another dimension of my presentation. It denotes, that efficient and accountable governance. It is not limited to having established political system by which the state are governed. It is much more than that, because that now the more and more state society relations are becoming more stronger, and they are talking about the that responsible, accountable, practical type of political systems. These are the things. Of course, that in course of time, in the last century also, some of the political figures like Woodrow Wilson, like Winston Churchill, and frankly, the Roosevelt, even Stalin, even Nazi Germany, so they try to revitalize. They try to give a new shape to the political system. In that context, Woodrow Wilson was very instrumental to found the League of Nations. Of course, it could not go for a long time, and then the United Nations, that. So things are global, not a local, that. That every society now, especially because of the communication, because of the technology, that nobody can be sit in the isolations, because people are more aggressive, more participatory, more conscious, that this kind of things. So particularly, also I would like to also mention that after the end of that Soviet communism, authoritarian regimes, totalitarian regimes, and monarchies also, that now roughly 2/3 of the humanity lives under some sort of democratic governance. In only about 12 or 20 countries, I don't know exactly the figure, but maybe less than 15 countries, they are ruled by the autocratic regimes. Other, about 4 dozen countries ruled by either democracy or autocracy, sometimes shift democracy, some autocracy, this kind of thing. So it is a huge achievement in the last 45 years, both in terms of governance, both in terms of, everything. That governance sectors also, in terms of, that good governance, in terms of globalization, in terms of economic change. Of course, that globalization has positive and negative both stages, both effects. But I think that it is more positive, looking at the past 40 years or so, So there are some problems, that right now many people say that if there is due to the globalization, the country they cannot implement their own policies because of that. But if these are helping this globalization, particularly focusing the community peoples and participatory, that they are developing the participatory mechanism through UNDP, through United Nations, through different organizations. So the country are getting much more benefited in the past. Yes, that we can see some kind of troubles after the COVID-19. It has produced confusion, uncertainty, and anxiety over the future. So it already, that exposed that, that we all know that many of the countries, including the advanced countries, they are also not in a position to tackle the situation. Even that, take for example, United States, that only the superpower also not in a position to tackle this COVID situation. About 200,000 people died, and how many more people will be dying through COVID? Nobody knows. Even Dr. Fauci is not also knowing about this kind of things. Thus, he was saying that yesterday that things are surging. So he is not thinking about the second surge or something like that. So in India, roughly 100,000 people are affecting every day, and many people are dying, more than 1,000 people every day. So that this COVID also, I feel that like that collapse of Soviet Union, like collapse of that we'll have the opportunity. We'll have the opportunity to create a new society, to create a new state-society relationship, create a new kind of participatory programs. Because that unless you have the government involve people in their decision-making process, unless they involve that the people's in every aspect of life, that the political system is not going to work. Right now, as I just mentioned, that many of the democracies are, that still in fragile conditions. That there are provisions. Every provision, there are rules, there are different kind of things to empower the people. But the rules are not properly implemented. There is implementation problems. That there are diverse ideologies, and some of them they support, some of them they not support. And basically, that also there is a rich poor gap widening day by day. And a country like mine, that Nepal, there are rules in every area, that, but the implementation is a problem because the leadership is so fragile, leadership is so self-vested, centered, that when they talk about much about when they are in opposition, when they are in power, they are not implemented. Some of the vested interests, some kind of political mafia, some kind of economic mafia, some kind of international mafia also, they are influencing the government, particularly in the country like Nepal. That, just for example, I will tell you, more than 300 people died through COVID. Maybe more than 1,500 people died through that suicide in past 100 days in Nepal. About 100 people died through suicide in Kathmandu in last 100 days. So that that people that this kind of situation now it is emerging, that that it will have a very long-lasting impact. This COVID also, it is more than a second World War, first World War situation. So that it is very. It also show that the situation also that provided us the opportunity to unite together, to work together. That it is not a tackling or overcoming of terrorism. It is not the overcoming of that other kind of things. This is a virus. It goes everywhere, and it needs a concerted effort to every nation, every country. So this kind of things. So I want to say that I do not want to that repeat whatever already about globalization and the governance. That many people they know about it. They are their own perception. My country also facing some kind of difficulty through this globalization. But that people are empowered. People are now conscious. You cannot compare the people 30 years ago to now. Because I am watching Nepali democracy since 1990. We have 3 constitutions in 30 years. Why still the constitution not is owned by owned by the majority of the, it is owned by the majority of people, not by all people. Still there are reservation, but you know that people are so fast. So that some presenters were talking that maybe people will go back, government will be more authoritarian, more despotic, which Professor Paul also was talking about these things. That I think there is no possibility. The democratic government right now we have in about more than 100 countries. They cannot go back the previous situation, authoritarian and other kind of totalitarian system. There is no way, because people are far ahead. You know that people are more conscious because of this globalization, because of this their connectivity. Because connectivity, they can read, they can study, they can throw this net, throw various channels, TV. You know that people are looking the developments elsewhere in the world happening every time. So there is not going to back, and there is no possibility to establish again. You know that authoritarian regimes like they were in the 19th century and 18th century and before that. And things are improving, but you know that definitely the leadership is a very key to make the politician order. And our political leadership, that declining. They are no, that they also compromise in many things, and they are not very accountable. They lies in many things, and there are some political science, political leaders, they lies every time. They are like a compulsive liar, something like that. So that that leadership is a really problem, and that this should be that not a big challenge, but that because of we have a democracy, we have the election, periodic election, and people can directly participate fearlessly. There is a fear-free and fearless participation in most of the cases, so that we can change the government in 5 years. This is the achievement, and this is the achievements of 30 years of democratic exercise and liberalization, globalization. But that the thing is that there is a big opportunity to reorient their policies, particularly in the social field. That it is not only to have economic equality. This is not a question of only the economic inequality. The government should have to focus on social sectors. That right now many people, they are not getting proper education. They are not. They don't have the public health. Is so expensive. They cannot afford, and they don't have the employment. Even they have properly educated. This kind of things. So that I also in favor of that kind of sustainable welfare state is required even in India, even in in other parts of the world, because that despite also that we have to have the improvement in the education, not in the university or college education. It should be improved, and that should be a new curricula, new methodology, new kind of training, new kind of knowledge should be given to our new generation of the people, so that we have to improve our systems from the grassroots levels, from the primary levels, maybe the kindergarten level, and that the education should be free to all. That there should be not be private school and public school. That there is a big gap in private school and public school. It is in my country in Kathmandu. If you go to the private school, they are properly educated. If you go to public school, they are mismanaged, something like that. So the public education system, where majority of people they are sending their children to have proper education. So this should be improved. Not only in free education is a must. That when people are educated, economic inequality will be diminished. It will not be a great problem. Yet that in many in India also that many people are still illiterate in the rural side. They don't. There are no population not are very good, and it is not hygienic, and there are not properly trained teachers. This kind of thing. So we have to have that focus on education. Then that we have to focus on that practical education. Even the university education, we are teaching the same subject. At least I am teaching the same kind of subject and same kind of books I refer to my students since maybe 35 to 40 years. So let us make the curriculum competitive. Let us make this kind of thing. This is very vital area. And let us have the universal education, at least for the primary, secondary education up to 12th class. But that should not be. That in United States, 92% people they go in the public schools. Only 8% American population they go in the that private schools. In the context of Canada, maybe more than 95% they go to the public schools. Even Japan, you know that even more than 90% people they go in the in the public schools. Their public school is totally competitive. In the case of Japan, you know that if you go to the private clinic, also you pay the same amount of money to check up. And if you go to the government hospital, also you pay the same amount. There is no separate rules. You know that there must be a kind of equality. You know that. So in Japan, you know that they charge the same things. If you go for a blood test, you pay the same price in the government hospitals in the private hospitals. In the case of India, I don't know, but in my case, you know that if I pay $40 rupees for the sugar diabetic checks in private, you know that public, I should pay the 100 rupees in the public. So that there must be, you know that we must think, we must, you know that we must rethink, you know that it will provide, you know that due to this COVID, I think it is a wonderful opportunity to all the leaders of the world, including the global leaders. You know that the developed countries like United Kingdom, Germany, you know that United States, Japan, you know that not only that to do two things because they fail their political system. I don't say that they are not tackling the situation very properly. So there are issues everywhere. You know, countries are not problem free. But you know that in the case of South Asia, Professor Paul also was talking that let's not concentrate. I think we should take initiatives to revitalize this you know that the associations where we can talk about terrorism, where we can talk about the education, where we can talk about the health system. So that these are the things that this should be taken very seriously. And I don't know here that you know that this the globalization and privatization, this kind of marketization, this kind of liberalization, democratization, giving the opportunity to the leaders of our region to work together. Because you know that if India, you know that just for example, India is now the COVID cases are rising, so we cannot sit because of the closed border. You know that. Also, if there is a problem in Nepal, also some kind of problem, India also should have this kind of thing. So we should work together, and by some, you know, that we should not be, you know, that instigated. We should not be impressed by other powers. So that let us decide. You know that expertise, you know that to tackle this common situation. So these are the things that. So I'm not saying that the globalization is good and bad, but it has given, you know, that ample opportunity and to learn each other because of the communication, because of the, you know, introducing various programs, and so it has giving a positive development in my country, maybe in India also. You know that, and this governance system also is not good still. It's still majority minorities, and I'm not talking, you know, that the political system will drastically change after the COVID over. COVID will not over. You know that according to Dr. Fauci, it will go several other years after. You know that it is not going to settle down very quickly. But anyway, that you know that I'm not going to say that there will be a new kind of political system, but there must be a new this compels this force. This will force that, you know, that to introduce new kind of strategy, new kind of, you know, that public policy program, new kind of, you know, public-private relationship, state-society relationship. There must be formidable state-society relationship. Still, you know, that the ruling elite, they do not consider the, you know, that viewpoints of the, you know, the civil society, even professional groups. They listen, you know, that hardly listen, you know, that program. So that this thing should be developed, and in course of time, I'm optimistic. I always used to say that I am a half glass full person. So that thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Again, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tapa, for your insightful presentation about the interactions between globalizations and good governance, considering problems like education on the backdrop of the coronavirus crisis. You mentioned a new political system after or because of the virus crisis, and I can tell you that this is another issue which is very heavily under discussion in Central Europe and in North America as well, because a lot of observers, not the politicians of course, but a lot of political scientists and other social scientists are afraid that we could get a more authoritarian managed political system, and in some countries in Europe, for example, Hungary, it seems already to be imminent. Okay, thank you very much again. The next speaker on my list is Professor Vinu Dan from the Department of International Relations, Mahatma Gandhi University in Kerala. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Martin Malik. At the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to express my deep gratitude to Professor Rajkumar Kothari and the team of East Bengal Institute of Political Studies for giving me an opportunity to participate in this very important program. And also I take this opportunity to congratulate the team for documenting the major works they did in the recent past, especially in the COVID-19 period, and bringing out the newsletter and some fantastic works. So it was very impressive. So congratulations. And so my paper is on the power transition, global power shift. The recent developments, this pandemic is going to impact on the global system, and also how the power transition and the pandemic, the impact of pandemic will impact on India, and what are the major challenges India is going to face in the coming days. So as we all know that the world is witnessing, especially among the academics and policy makers, about the power transition theories in international relations, how we all observed that 21st century has been marked by the unprecedented level of transformation in global politics. The gravity of power is shifting from the west to east, especially towards the Asia, the rise of China, and also it is spearheading these movements in the Asian region, and Japan is also supporting this Asian rise. And here we are witnessing a new kind of development, new kind of power shift. The COVID-19 is redefining or redesigning all our calculations, how this is going to impact on the international system, the state system, or the changing role of the state, as already we have mentioned, especially deglobalization, debates on deglobalization, as mentioned by Shashi Tharoor and other experts in this field. We are thinking about the post-globalization era. So this challenge, that the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic across the globe, further redefined this transformation. So we can see that the COVID-19 pandemic is the most disruptive global event since the Great Depression and the World War II. I would like to suggest one of the recent observation made by Henry Kissinger is the impact on health is temporary. That is, according to Kissinger, impact on health is temporary, but impact on economy and the global political order is long-lasting. That is a very important point
as a student of international relations and political science, we should notice that its impact is going to be a long lasting in the political change or the power transition. We can see the pandemic will forever alter world order. That means we are witnessing a world without leadership, world without any leadership, and also impossible for a single country. We can also see that impossible for a single country to lead the world in this era of non-traditional challenges, security challenges confronting the nation states and the people across the world. We can see that the world is witnessing and without a leadership, and also we recognize that it is not possible for a single country to guide us out of these crises. So the United States and China are as discussed by many presentations, TV poll, and also many others pointed out that US and China, we are all expecting the role of China and the United States and the confrontation between these two. My observation is that it is impossible for Chinese or US leadership to unilaterally intervene or unilaterally make any positive changes in this uncertain situation, because the leadership like capability, it means material capabilities. For the first thing, we can see the lack of material capability, both in the United States and also in the Chinese part. We can see that, and to the skill of leadership, and China and the US. President Trump has proved the weak leadership and going to beat the crisis. We all notice that Trump also undermined the leadership through weak handling of the situation, especially in the accurate judgment of the situation and right decision. That is a major drawback from the part of the United States. No coordinated approach, even domestically, even within the United States, we can see that there is no coordinated approach among the states, and or internationally also. The United States is not playing any role to mobilize states to collectively address this issue. That is, for example, implies we can see that divisive tendencies are increasing. For example, the case of the global health governance, the US withdrawal from the World Health Organization is the best example. Economic costs are staggering. Much of the world has fallen into recession. We all know that. Debt level are soaring. The future growth prospects have dimmed. It is in some ways the first fully global crisis in human history, one from which no country can remain aloof. So we can see that crisis brings geopolitics into the center stage. But there is the debates on China, the rise of China and its role in the post-pandemic world once again draw global attention. After 1914, we can see that China expanded its footprint in almost all parts of the globe through the BRI initiatives. And BRI was the major strategic initiative to China's global reach. US stepping back from its global leadership during COVID-19, withdraw from the WHO. European response to the crisis was not promising. China and Russia going ahead with new kind of cozy alliances. I would like to say the cozy alliance between China and Russia, moving to. So my observation is that we are moving towards a multiple triangle in international relations. The multiple triangle in. There are two debates on that: US, China, Russia on the one side, or other groups argue that the possible coming together of US, India, and China. So these are the developments. Today, countries across the continents are fighting to reduce the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Development more indicate that the post-COVID-19 world will be different in many ways, economically, socially, and politically. One thing is sure that no country will come out of this crisis without losing something. Strong and powerful states are redefining their strategies to face the new realities. They are trying to create a new international order to further their economic and political interests. They are challenging the role of the international institutions. The global governance institution is in crisis. We can witness global governance architecture is challenged by the creators of this architecture. The United States and China are the major players in this game. The new situation already created tension in their relationship, especially in the areas of technology. We can see that security, regional alignments, global governance, etc. The pandemic had already inflicted heavy blow to the countries of the global south, as mentioned by Professor Paul in his. It's a heavy blow to the global South African and Latin American and even in South Asian countries. It will be a heavy blow to the global south. China is already projecting it as an image as a winner in the COVID-19 fight. The US-led liberal hegemonic order has already been challenged by the Chinese leadership. The US is also rebalancing its alliance strategy to counter the growing Chinese influence in Asia and beyond. So if you look at the pandemic and the changes, the current pandemic will not transform the essential. We can see that it is not going to change. I don't think it is not going to change the nature of the state system. The territorial state will remain the basic building block of international affairs. Nationalism will remain a powerful political force, and the major powers will continue to compete for influence and in a myriad ways. Global institutions, transnational network, and assorted non-state actors will still play an important roles, of course. But the present crisis will not produce a dramatic and enduring increase in global governance or significantly higher levels of international cooperation. Instead, COVID-19 is more likely to reinforce divisive trends that were underway before the first case was detected. In particular, it will accelerate a retreat from globalization, as I mentioned in the beginning of my lecture, then raise new barriers to international trade, investment, and travel, and give both democratic and non-democratic governments greater power over their citizens and lives. Global economic growth will lower than it would have been had the pandemic not occurred. Relations among the major powers will continue to downward trend, and that was apparent before the pandemic struck. In short, we can see that the post-pandemic, post-COVID-19 world will be less open, less free, less prosperous, and more competitive than the world many expected only a few years ago. So here my argument is that the world after COVID-19 will be different and difficult one, and unprecedented economic hardship and rampant social anxieties become the new normal. So let me come to the Indian side. How India is going to face these new realities. India needs to address these new issues. India is in the midst of these two powers, especially the China and the United States, and also compelled to redefine its own balancing strategy. The Indian foreign policy is undergoing dramatic changes, especially to balance to design its own balancing act to deal with these powers. The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented shock to the Indian economy. The economy was already in a very difficult state before COVID-19 struck, with the prolonged countrywide lockdown, global economic downturn, and associated disruption of demand and supply chains. The economy is likely to face protracted period of slowdown. The magnitude of the economic impact will depend upon the duration and severity of the health crisis, the duration of the lockdown, and the manner in which the situation unfolds once the lockdown lifted. India has a middle power status and rising power mindset. The emerging multipolar world manifests opportunities as well as challenges to India's foreign policy. We can see that it was a big setback for Prime Minister Modi's economy first approach, rooted in his desire to create external conditions necessary to ensure domestic economic progress. India is currently confronting with the fragile security environment, fragile security environment especially in its neighborhood is also not conducive to further. The pandemic has created an uncertain international system with power transition to all levels, economic, military, and technology. India is also concerned about the global supply chains, especially in the Indian Ocean, South China Sea, and the Indo-Pacific. India is confronting challenges. Yes. So in this context, India stands for a multilateralism and the creation of a just and rule-based international order to manage the post-pandemic challenges at multiple levels. Ideas of plurilateralism and global cooperation needs much attention. At the regional level, India's fragile South Asian neighborhood and strained relations with China posing serious challenges to India's foreign policy. India's multilateral diplomacy has evolved significantly over time based on its priorities and on structural changes in the international system. Today, India's domestic imperatives of providing social security and prosperity to its people necessitate peace and stability in its extended neighborhood and beyond. To this end, India has had to bolster its bilateral and multilateral engagement with some of the many multilateral forums, a new format that can be best to be described as plurilateralism. These clubs or groups serve a variety of purposes. They primarily help India recast some assumptions and norms on key debates as it makes the transition from being part of global opposition to a global agenda-setting role. While India is a member of several such groups, including the G20, G20, BRICS, IPSA, RIC, Russia, India, China groups. So India, I would like to conclude that India is going to pursue plurilateralism at a regional level and also advocating multilateralism at the global level. Thank you very much, Professor Kothari and team for. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Vinod, for your presentation about how the pandemic will affect India and the entire international system. I have a lot of takeaways from your lecture. First of all, you pointed to the shifting of gravity of power from the east to the west. This is almost nonsense. I mean, in political science and in politics in Central and Western Europe, to be honest, I do not know any serious specialist on international affairs who would deny this, would say that the West will increase its power. That almost no such voices. Then I noticed your very interesting terms about deglobalization and post-globalization. This, to be honest, is new for me, but I will think about that, and I will try to tell you about how the meaning of this term will evolve. Then you complained about the absence of global leadership. Well, maybe it is, at least for a certain time, not that bad that there is no global leadership. Because which global leadership we want to have? The global leadership of Donald Trump or the global leadership of China? This is maybe we should try to find something else, a third version, a third expression of global leadership. Then I mentioned your triangle between the United States, China, and Russia. Well, as a citizen of European Union member country, I would like, at least in the future, to see the European Union present here. Then, with regard to returning to the shift of power from west to the east, it would be maybe an interesting question for future research to examine the meaning of China's so-called new Silk Road. Because there are some assumptions according to which it is possible that China, using this so-called New Silk Road, tries not only to export goods, but also to export its political system. And this comes already to one of your conclusions, that the post-COVID world will maybe or almost probably be less free and less open. Yes, this is again a very, very popular concern in Central Europe as well. So thank you very much again. You were our last speaker at this panel. According to the schedule, we have about 10 minutes session for interaction. And I've noticed on the screen that there were several questions to our panelists, especially to Professor Sarkar. Professor Sarkar, can you hear me?
Obinanda, unmute yourself. Obinanda, unmute yourself.
Okay, it's up. Yeah, I can hear you.
Professor Sarkar, yes. Have you noticed the question?
Yes, I have noticed the question.
Yeah.
Do you want me to answer them?
Yes, I want you.
Okay.
As briefly as possible, but anyway, could you answer them?
I will answer them, to the extent I can. The first question is about self-reliant India.
Yes.
How does that fit in, especially with respect to the relationship between India and China? Now, self-reliant India, one has to understand, one has to interpret it in the proper spirit. There was a time when India used to produce almost everything, behind tariff walls. But most of the things were produced very inefficient. And certainly we don't want to go back to those times. What probably self-reliant India means is that India needs to produce goods which are competitive in the international market. So the benchmark is the international market, and India needs to be competitive there, right? Otherwise, behind tariff walls, it doesn't make sense to go back to the no trade situation. Now, therefore, of course, I think that we need to be globalized. We need to take advantage of international markets, both from the supply side as well from the demand side. That is, both in terms of technology and raw materials, and as well as selling our goods to international consumers. About China, now this is my personal opinion. I think India, if you look at India-China, trade relationship, compared to Indian exports, Chinese exports are way more. It's about, I don't remember exactly, maybe 5 or 6 times, maybe even more. So our dependence on China is gradually growing. If we are buying, more than we are selling, that means we are incurring a debt to China. So as a result, Chinese capital is coming into the country and entering extremely important strategic sectors. And that is something that needs to be avoided, I think. I am all in favor of free trade, globalization and all that. But with China, we do not have a particularly reliable relationship. We have a very unstable relationship. So it's better to replace Chinese trade with China with trade with, let's say, Europe or the US or other Asian countries. But we have to reduce our dependence on China. So that's one question. The other question is that is about why globalization led to an increase in inequality. Well, the reason is that globalization opened up opportunities, new opportunities, but the privileged and the underprivileged could not take, equal advantage of such opportunities. The underprivileged, they were not well educated, they were not, in good health and so on. They didn't have the right kind of capital. So they could not take proper advantage of the opportunities which were thrown up by globalization. As a result, the rich or let's say the privileged, they benefited proportionately more, and that led to inequality. And now the politics behind this question is whether this inequality had an impact on our electoral politics. Now, one can argue that, of course, we have a democracy and the number of poor is much higher than the number of rich. So why isn't it the case that, the government is taking policies which will favor the poor rather than the rich? That is a pertinent question. But, you see, our form of electoral politics or the elections in particular, they need a lot of funding. Let us face that. And that comes from the rich. That comes from the privileged. So there is a trade-off between the people who are actually voting and the people who are funding the elections. And unfortunately, because the general education level, general level of awareness of the people is not very high, you can actually substitute, pro-poor policies by advertising yourself. And these advertisements would be funded by the rich. So you take pro-rich policies, get funding from them, and, well, basically, keep a blind eye to pro-poor policies. That is possible. And that is how, this rising inequality has been politically sustained. So I think that is all. Or is there any other question? Okay. How would lockdown affect citizens' lives? Well, that is something. Lockdown has led to very serious economic, crisis. There has been almost a 25% fall in GDP. So obviously, people are very badly affected by lockdown. Okay, public assets. Public assets. Someone has asked me to explain why it is not the right time to sell public assets. Well, reason is very obvious. All over the world, a crisis is going on. Firms who are potential buyers, they don't have the money right now because they cannot sell their products in the market. This is a very, very special situation. So firms do not have the money, and as a result, for the public assets, the bids that you are expected to get are going to be much less, much lower. So this is not, in my opinion, this is not the right time to sell public assets. Okay. Let me be more clear. I am not against the sales of public assets. If you get the proper price, you can sell public assets. I won't say that it's they create employment and so on, so you should speak to them and so on. I'm not going to say that. If you get the right price, it's not the government's job to enter into production, for example, to enter into mining, to enter into running hotels and airports and so on. Government can sell them. That's fine with me. But one has to get the right price. And this is not the time when you are likely to get the right price. Okay, so thank you very much. I think all the questions that we had, it seems. Yeah. There are other questions for the other speakers, please.
Yes, Professor Shakshi, thank you very much for your replies. There were questions, I think, to Professor Thapa as well. Professor Thapa, are you ready to answer? I think it was about Nepal's role in the Indian-Chinese border dispute, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Thapa, unmute yourself, unmute yourself.
Professor Thapa, can you hear us?
Sir, unmute yourself, Professor Thapa. So
I'm afraid that he cannot hear us.
Sir, Professor Thapa, please unmute. I think better to go Vinod. Huh?
Yes, okay. I hope he will answer a little bit later, but there were questions to Professor Vinodan as well. Professor Vinodan, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I noticed two questions. So one is on the lockdown. So I think lockdown has inflicted heavy blow to the ordinary citizens of this country, but at the same time, this kind of measures it taught us the new way of life, because in this particular situation, that across the world we can see the world, this kind of practice is going on. So we cannot keep away from this. It taught many things, especially a new way of life, living with the virus. That is also an important thing that I noticed. It taught the people about hand washing, sanitizing, and also using masks and all these things. This kind of practice is people take this lockdown because of the experience of all the people about the seriousness of all these things. That is one answer, and the second one is the staggered or irregular lockdown. So that's also, I think, especially in Kerala's experiences, it is now it is widespread of COVID-19 we are witnessing in Kerala, but we are also we are practicing this kind of scattered or irregular lockdown. This is also an important part of the public health measure to prevent this more spread, especially in the community spread to the across the state. So in that way, I think these measures are in a public health point of view, but in the human security angle or its impact on poverty, impacts on livelihood, it is a very, very, very damaging. But at the economic impact as mentioned by Professor, but at the same time, public health point of view, it is also, I think, this message and my second question, I think it's on China. Is on China? China-centric global order. Yes. I don't think it's a China-centric, it's a unipolar China-centric order. My projection is there. And I use this for forget that there is the possibility of an alliance system that we witnessed in the interwar period. That is, there is a possibility of an alliance system. And another answer to this is we don't know exactly what is the position of China, especially in COVID-19. What is the exact number of deaths? What its economy? What are the progress in finding out vaccine? Chinese. Also, there are some news about the China also successfully tested some vaccines. We don't know exactly. We don't know exactly. I myself has also visited 2-3 times in China, different universities, and visited some places. I don't know what exactly happening in there. We are also part of many Chinese groups.
but we are not getting any right kind of information. In that sense, I don't think the world is going to be, but China is an important power. Important power. We can see that. But China-centric world is not possible. In many ways, many of the countries is not trusting China. But there will be an alliance system. There are possibilities of recent Indo-China conflict is also pointing to this direction. There will be the coming years an alliance system to power blocks or something like that. That is my answer. Next supporting question is that how India's position. So I think India can play a very meaningful role. India should use all its potential to mediate between not joining with a particular bloc of the US or the Chinese. India should it's on real non-alignment. This is a kind of situation that is emerging, reinventing our non-alignment policy. That is, it is not joining with this, and India can at the same time play a very constructive role in supporting all these states in a constructive way. That is my argument. That is in India. So India has a balancing role as a balancer. Both the power blocs are trying to rebalance. The United States is very much interested into bringing India into its own fold, and I don't think that is going to benefit India in the long term, because China, our immediate neighbor, China is very important country to us. So that way, I think India is a constructive balancer. That is my position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Vinodan. Professor Tapa, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Hey, you can. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm going to answer the questions asked.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
Yeah, what is the question? Can you repeat me?
Yeah, the first one I think was about the possible role of Nepal in the Indian-Chinese politics dispute.
Okay. Thank you for the questions. You know that, let us repeat that Nepal-India relation is based on, the mutual non-aggression, mutual non-interference, and based on respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, and equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. So, Nepal-India relation is a very old and for some long time, and we are so close in terms of everything, socially, culturally, politically, economically. So, that we do not want any kind of aligned relationship with either China or India, because of the geographical reality is that we are in between. I always used to say that India and China consider us as a buffer state. That 500 miles buffer state, and we do not want to align anybody, any countries, and even that other powers also. So that Nepal want a very cordial relationship between India and China also, because of that they are emerging superpower by the end of the century. Maybe in previous presentation also I have told that maybe that in 4 years time China will take over America and India become third or second. So these two countries also that should be have a very cordial relations. Of course, some kind of territorial dispute is there in between Nepal and India, China also. But that we are that entering in a very democratic society, and there are several ways to settle out the situation. We will not allow any Indian power in Nepal to act against them. That we respect the Indian security sentiments. Also, Nepal do not allow any kind of anti-Indian sentiment from its soil. Also, Nepal also is equally committed. It will not allow any anti-Chinese activity from Nepal. So we want to see, because we want to benefit from both the countries we want both the countries to participate, to cooperate, to help us in our development process in every opinion, not only economic development, it's also a political process also. India, we very much regard that since long time it is supporting to our political movement in 1990, in 2008, 2015, or even 1990, 51, also even that. So that we cannot have any kind of acrimonious relationship with India. So we want both the countries, China and India, to help us to consider our geopolitical realities. I mean that we are a kind of a sandwich. Basically, that I used to say that we are not only a landlocked, but also we are India rocked, because north of the Nepalese territory is covered by mountains. Of course, it is also open border, but east, west, and south also is covered by India. So we want to retain the age-old relationship, but in the course of time, in the changing of time, we also make our relationship contextual. Steps, that younger our neighbors, particularly in India and China, sir. This is
okay. Okay, with kind permission to Professor Martin Malik, I would like to actually request you to conclude this session, because due to the short of time, we are already running out of time. Please officially just conclude the session, and then I would give the vote of thanks.
That's already what I was going to do, because we are running out of time. Thank you very much to all the panelists and for the participants of the discussion. I think it was very fruitful. I want to conclude this panel with a quotation of the former German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel, who called, quote, for a state capable of acting, which should not only be geared to optimal times, when everything is going well anyway. Instead, Mr. Gabriel said, it must be able to react in times of crisis. But we have often made this state quite weak, unquote. So, again, thank you very much, dear colleagues. And I want to hand over the chair to Professor Nandi, who will, I think it's up to him to conclude the vote of thanks. Thank you very much again for inviting me, and I wish your event success. Goodbye.
Thank you, Professor Malik, for your excellent sharing over the session. And now I would like to convey vote of thanks to all of you. Actually, in this part business session, we have three distinguished speakers. Professor Obiruk Sarkar from Indian Institute of Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata. Professor C. Vinodan from the Department of International Relations, Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala. Professor Tonga Thapa from Jibun University, Kathmandu, Nepal. Yes, really, we have been enriched by these three speakers. They have highlighted and critically analyzed three different aspects. These three aspects are very much pertinent, addressed to the current situation of COVID-19, and they had given the right direction and what policies can be taken by India in near future to combat the COVID-19, and what kinds of policies can be taken by India in the new normal situation. And Professor Vinodan also mentioned the power, what kind of power India is, middle power or emerging power, and how India will deal with China. Professor Parikar rightly mentioned the economic crisis of India and how India will overcome the current economic situation. And Professor Thapa has very insightfully discussed about the role of the state in the era of globalization, what kind of educational policies can be taken in near future to address the problem, and what kinds of research methodology will be adapted by the states to address the new situation. And on behalf of the Bips, I would like to really convey our special gratitude and thanks to all of you to give you time and to present a very relevant papers. And we have all of us have been enlightened. And I would like to convey my special thanks to Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Muralidharan, Mr. Professor T.P. Paul, our President, Professor Rajkumar Kothari, Secretary, Professor Vishwanath Chakraborty, Joint Convener, Professor Abhishek Karmakar and Professor Pradipta Mukherjee, and our Bips team, Professor Shilpa Nandi, Joy Prakash Mandal, and Jepto Rumaji, Prato Saruki, they and others. So it is a collective effort. Really, the entire Bips team had required a lot over the last few months to successfully organize this event, because due to this situation, we are so much worried how to organize this event. So, however, now I would like to Shilpa to say something as a discussion. If you have any observation, please within 1.5 minutes, please say something about your observation over the session. Shilpa, are you available? Hello.
Yes,
Professor,
Yes.
Professor Nodi, because it is expected that Shilpa, the discussion of this session will be there on in the valedictory session, if I am not wrong.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Shilpa, am I right?
Yes, absolutely. It will be at the, at the valedictory session. It was.
Okay, with these few words, I would like to conclude the session. To actually,
only one two announcement, serious announcement, that please all the discussion and coordinator of the different panel, please be ready and join in time, so that all the chairperson from the different parts of the world, all the co-chairperson and all the paper presenter can get you in time. So please keep in time so that we can again start post-lunch parallel session in time. All the coordinator, panelists and discussions are requested to always look in time, get access and come in the platform, parallel platform. Okay, with this we are concluding here. Thank you all.
thank you.
Sir, a very humble request to all the participants. So please join in the different parallel sessions as per your own interest area, and the parallel sessions of paper presentation will be followed by valedictory session, and in the valedictory session